Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here as the guest of these two wonderful women on my side. You may not recognize me in my new outfit, but I'm Nahid Nenshi, the new leader of Alberta's NDP, and happy to be here in the legislature, day one of work. I have an announcement to make, and then I am willing to take questions on really anything, and I'll tell you all about how I've been very overwhelmed on day one. I am joined today, as you can see, by MLA for Edmonton Millwoods, Christina Gray, MLA for Calgary Whitemud, Rakhi Pancholi.
Edmonton Whitemud.
What did I say?
Calgary Whitemud, but I'll take it.
There is no Whitemud in Calgary, thankfully. Edmonton Whitemud, Rakhi Pancholi, and I'm here to make a leadership announcement. So the resignation of Rachel Notley is now effective, and as I do not hold a seat in the legislature, I'm not actually leader of the opposition. I am leader of Alberta's NDP, but I am thrilled that Christina Gray has agreed to take on the mantle of leader of His Majesty's official opposition here in Alberta, in addition to her work as House Leader for the Alberta NDP. So Christina, thank you. She's amazing. We all know she's amazing, and we know that she will continue in this role. And I'm also thrilled to announce today that after much begging and pleading on my part, Rakhi Pancholi has agreed to take on the mantle of Deputy Leader of Alberta's NDP. So bravo to both of them for doing this. You're going to see a lot more of these folks running things internally here in the legislature and really being the face of the Alberta NDP with me out in the community as well. So I'll let you know as well that I've had a good first day of work here, and let you know kind of what's going on now and where we're going from here. So we've made this leadership announcement. We're not making any other changes in the House leadership or the critic roles at this time. We're really going to spend a lot of time with the extraordinary 38-member caucus to talk a lot about how we can work together more effectively, and we'll have some more announcements in due course over the coming weeks and months on that work. I have been spending some time with the staff of the caucus, and we will commence a bunch of one-on-one meetings with caucus members over the course of the rest of the week before the Pinoca Stampede, which kicks off a summer of great listening all over the province for myself and my caucus colleagues. We'll also have a caucus retreat next week as we continue the work of setting ourselves up as the government of waiting here in Alberta. So with that, let me stop unless either of you have anything you'd like to add.
We're excited.
Let's go to questions.
Okay, just a reminder, if you're on Zoom, it's the raise hand function. If you're on the phone, it's *9 to get in the question queue. Please state your name and outlet and who you'd like to direct your question to. We'll start here in the room.
Hi, Catherine Gurkowski, Alberta Today. So
You're a real person, not just a Twitter person.
I'm real.
Great to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. So how will it work in terms of the resources? So the funding for the official opposition leader comes from the LAO. Will you be paid by the party in the meantime until you get a seat? And how does staffing work, like chief of staff, comms people?
What a delightfully inside question. That I have no idea what the answer is. And I'm sorry to start off with I have no idea what the answer is. These are all things we're discussing right now. There's tons of precedent for this. As you well know, the leader of the Wild Rose Party at the time did not take her seat in the legislature for 3 years. I forget her name. Oh yeah, Danielle Smith. There's a lot of precedent for this. Speaker Cooper has been really great in helping us think through this, and we'll have answers to that over the next few days. The precedent probably is that the party will take on the compensation of the leader until such time as I'm a member, but all of that will be sorted, and we'll let people know when we sort it. Did you have a follow-up, Catherine?
Yeah, so on Alberta at Noon, you mentioned that you want to end wasteful spending, and I'm wondering, what does that look like? Where is that wasteful spending that you're going to cut?
Oh my goodness, I think on the day that I launched, there was a super cut of me making a list of questionable spending on the part of the UCP. In fact, I said, all they know how to do is pick fights and waste money. So let's start with $100 million on Turkish Tylenol that came out to $14,000 a bottle. Let's talk about $20 billion proposed so that polluters don't have to pay for their responsibilities. Let's talk about $1.5 billion bet on Donald Trump winning the election in 2020. This party, this UCP government, has increased spending by more in 2 years than Rachel Notley increased spending in 4 years under an NDP government. And what do we have to show for it? Are Albertans better off? Do we have a better public education or a public health care system? Has life become more affordable? None of those things are true. And in the strong tradition of prairie progressives, folks like Roy Romano and Gary Dewar, we know that NDP governments run budgets better than Conservative governments do, and that is absolutely the tradition that we'll be following here.
Shailen Skalski with CTV News here in Edmonton. You said in the past that you're not in any rush to win a seat, but not having the title official opposition leader, does that impact your strategy at all in growing the party like you said you would and winning in 2027? And walk me through what exactly are the steps of that strategy?
Great question. So yeah, I'm in no rush to get a seat. I don't much care about titles, though I am super excited for Christina to have that title. Are you super excited about it? It's so cool. It's so cool. But I am in no rush to gain a seat in the legislature because I actually think that having not been in the legislature before, having been in politics in a different way, I bring a set of fresh eyes to the situation. And most Albertans don't know that our Alberta legislature actually doesn't meet all that much. It's one of the lowest meeting in terms of frequency of meetings legislatures in North America. And so I really want to ensure that we're out in the community talking to Albertans. You know, we talk a lot about the pejorative term dome disease. I don't think that's a very nice thing to say because the work that happens here is important. But I think that we will be really focused on talking to Albertans. And, you know, if you're going to ask for a change in how the caucus will work in the fall sitting and going forward, I think we're going to be less focused on having the perfect question period zinger and much more focused on building the work of building a vision for a better Alberta with the rest of Albertans. So as for me, you know, I likely will not run in Lethbridge West. I certainly will have conversations with the constituency there. I really believe that MLAs need to be champions for their communities. And unlike the Premier, who represents a community in which she does not live and kind of pops in a couple times a year, I really believe that folks deserve to have a great local MLA. Now look, if the people locally say to me, Nahid, you're our guy, I'm happy to have that conversation, but I'm not rushing into it. You know, I was recently in the Premier's riding just last week in a standing room only room, and someone came up and had some serious questions about underfunding of education in Medicine Hat. And I jokingly said, well, your local MLA has some power over that. Can't she fix it? And the woman said, to quote Mean Girls, she doesn't even go here. I've never seen Mean Girls, but it sounds like a good quote. And so I really do believe that. And you know what? The opportunity will arise in the right time and in the right place for me to take a seat in the legislature, to present myself for election, to take a seat in the legislature, but it's not my first priority right now. Follow up?
Yeah, I follow up, but as well, if you can just speak to this strategy and to winning in 2027 as well. And then just in terms of a follow-up, in terms of the affiliations between the provincial and federal party, how and when are you going to be initiating that discussion around cutting ties, or have you already started those conversations?
Great, thank you for both of those. So I'll very briefly talk about the strategy. We're going to have days and weeks and months to talk about this strategy, but the strategy is really straightforward. The elections I've won by listening to people and focusing on what's important to them. And what we need to do is be able to do that across this province. You know, it's so easy for political strategists to just look at me and go, all right, his approval ratings at the end were higher than Danielle Smith's have ever been. If you just take a map of Calgary and overlay where he won 3 times versus where the NDP lost some seats, you'd have an NDP majority government. It's not that easy. We have to re-win every single vote. We have to re-win every vote in Edmonton. We have to reach out to the people in the suburban communities surrounding Calgary and Edmonton. We have to be in the mid-sized cities in Red Deer and in Grand Prairie and in Lethbridge and in Medicine Hat and in Fort McMurray. And we have to be in the more agricultural, smaller communities across the province. We've got to show up everywhere. So what you're going to see is an 87-seat strategy. Raki and I are going to spend a lot of time at chambers of commerce and Rotary clubs, and 4-H clubs, and in coffee shops and kitchen tables, along with our caucus colleagues across the province, co-creating with Albertans a vision for the community. It's not going to be top-down. It's going to be really something that is organically built from what Albertans dream about for this place. So that's kind of the broad strokes, and a lot more of that will get fleshed out over time. So on the other question, you know, every single day on the trail, I heard people say, I knocked on so many doors in this last election. And I always heard, I'm nervous about Danielle Smith, The UCP is not the Conservatives I've always voted for. I like Rachel Notley. I like the NDP, but. And there were always two things that came after that word but. The first one was but the economy. And so we have to prove to Albertans that we are better stewards of the economy than the Conservatives are. And the other but was I'm uncomfortable with the federal NDP. And certainly when we started this race, I was nervous because a lot of folks said to me, I want to support you, but I don't want to join the federal NDP when I join the provincial NDP. And a lot of people are not political nerds. I know that shocks me every time I hear it. But most people probably don't know that every political party in Canada except the NDP, the provincial parties are independent of the federal party. So the Ontario Liberals are not affiliated with the federal Liberals. The UCP is not affiliated with the Conservative Party of Canada. Of course they get along, of course they work together, but they're unaffiliated. Only the NDP is different. So I think there are lots of options going forward for members to make that decision. I certainly have an opinion. My opinion is that we should be in charge of our own destiny. But ultimately, the members will make that vote. And the way I work as a leader is I don't like when conversations bubble under the surface. I like to surface them. And so we'll have an opportunity to surface a very clear choice for the members to make. We'll be starting that relatively quickly. I imagine that we'll have a conversation about it at Provincial Council this fall and surface it at convention next spring and make a decision and move on. And I will abide by whatever the decision the members make is. Oh, and you asked if the conversations have already started. I'll say the only conversations that I've had with the federal party to date have been reaffirming that any conversation we have will be done out of mutual respect and admiration, will be done out of an embracing of our history together. And if it's a divorce, it's not a messy divorce. We're not fighting over custody and the kids. It will be amicable, and we're still going to be friends, and we're still going to work together in the future.
Okay. Jonathan Bradley, Western Standard.
Hi.
So you mentioned that Christina Greer will become official opposition leader and Rocky Pancholi will become deputy leader. Why did you feel compelled to have Christina become official opposition leader and Rocky as deputy leader?
So it's a very technical thing, which is that Rachel Notley's resignation is effective today. And as a result, for all of the structure of the Legislative Assembly to work, there must be someone in the role of leader of the opposition, even though the legislature isn't sitting. So it was very important for that announcement to be made today. And it was a very easy decision. Christina has conducted herself with incredible grace. She is beloved by people on all sides of the aisle for her legislative knowledge and for her remarkable work as House Leader. So that was easy. And Christina has also agreed to keep the role of House Leader for now and manage both of those roles, especially while the House is not sitting. As for Rocky, you know, ever since I have met Rocky, I have said that she has a secret sauce that is so rare. I'm going to embarrass you. She has a secret sauce that is so rare in politics, which is Rocky can go in any room and she can talk to people about what matters to them. She listens, she understands, and she is able to help people understand that there is an alternative and a better government. And man, oh man, I'm going to use that to the best advantage of the province and of the party from now.
Okay, and my follow-up pertains to the caucus retreat you spoke about.
Yes.
So you said that's coming up in about a week or so.
Yes.
What do you intend on focusing on at the caucus retreat?
First of all, I need to get to know my colleagues a little better. You know, I've had the good fortune of knowing a lot of them, certainly the Calgary ones, many of them I know very well. But I'm really interested in hearing from them about how things have been going, about what could be better, what is working, and how we can be much more effective. My philosophy as a leader has always been around focus and alignment. And so I want to make sure that we are very disciplined, that we are very focused on the things that Albertans care about and in providing Albertans that alternative. So it'll be a chance to set the tone. It'll be a chance to work together as a team for the first time and figure out how we're going to come together. Oh, and because of when it's happening, it's also a chance to talk about the Stampede schedule, which is going to be something. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the phones now. And just a reminder to state your name and outlet and who you'd like to direct your question to. Alex, your line should be open.
So much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Awesome. On the carbon tax, the federal backstop, the Manitoba Premier has called for, or he wants an exemption to that backstop for his province. As Alberta's NDP leader, what's your stance on, especially the consumer side, so the consumer carbon tax? Would you also want an exemption for that?
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I think that there has been a real challenge in the way that the federal government has managed this file, particularly on the exemption on home heating oil. And however, I also am very cognizant of the fact that we won't be in government probably for 3 years. And inshallah, as I always say, God willing. But that means that we have to deal with the environment when we get that environment. So if there is, in fact, a Liberal government in power in 2027, then there will be a federal price on carbon. And we can fight that in the courts, but it's fruitless. There will be a federal price on carbon. The Supreme Court has ruled that that is allowed by the federal government. And so then we have three choices. Choice number one is stick with the federal carbon price and rebate as it exists now with zero administrative costs for Alberta. Option number two is create a made in Alberta solution as we had under the Rachel Notley government where we can do what we want with the money. And option number three is a cap and trade program. There's really only three options. I'm very skeptical of the cap and trade program making sense for the Alberta economy. And we would really be able to have a conversation about whether a federal solution without the attendant administrative costs or a provincial solution makes more sense for Alberta. I'm agnostic into that solution right now. If, on the other hand, we have a Conservative government in 2027, there will be no federal price on carbon. And so what we really have to do is see what Mr. Poilievre's carbon plan is. He has suggested that he wants to move to carbon neutrality by 2050. Every economist will tell you that a carbon price is the most efficient way of moving to carbon neutrality. But if he's got better ideas that don't involve a consumer price on carbon, I'm happy to hear them, and I'm happy to align Alberta to make sure that we're not working at cross purposes with the federal government as well. But we got to get to those net zero goals. What we cannot have is government like the one we've got now that professes to be committed to the net zero goal and then says no to every single action that might get us to the net zero goal. Do you have a follow-up? And I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. You broke out when you jumped in.
Sorry, it's Alex Ballingal with the Toronto Star.
Great, thanks, Alex.
Star. And just as a follow-up, just so I understand, so if the Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives, you know, their slogan acts the tax, so we know what they're going to do.
Yeah, there'll be no federal price on carbon, yeah.
So, you know, if that happens, you guys won't take power in Alberta, would you be comfortable with Alberta not having a consumer carbon tax?
As long as we have pathways towards getting us to net zero, I am very open to what those pathways would look like. But that really is a hypothetical. And, you know, I think it's a very fair question for Mr. Poilievre, which is he's talked a lot about what he's not going to do, but we really haven't heard much about what he is going to do, particularly on the industrial carbon tax, which I assume he's going to keep in place, but also what he will do to encourage consumers to use less carbon, because that has to be part of a net zero solution. Thanks, Alex. We'll go to the next one.
Yeah, we'll go to Michelle Bellafontaine from CBC. Your line should be open.
Oh, hi there. Thanks for taking my question. You mentioned a couple of times that you're planning on going to the Pinoca Stampede. Tell me a little bit about, oh, I'm intrigued by that. Tell me a little bit about what you're planning to do there.
Well, it's the Pinoca Stampede, Michelle. There's going to be an amazing rodeo. There's going to be an amazing variety of fried food found on a stick. And it's going to be super fun. And I think Raki has already volunteered to come along. Though I'm not sure how you feel about the, you know, fried grasshopper ice cream stuff. But
I like stampedes though.
we'll figure it out. But in reality, what I really want to do is spend some time talking with people from other areas. The Pinoca Stampede is a huge gathering place for folks, for example, from the rural municipalities of Alberta. And it's a really good opportunity, and I know all these folks from when I was mayor, but it's a really good opportunity to reintroduce myself, to reintroduce some of the caucus members, and to hear a little bit about what's going on in central Alberta and across Alberta outside of Calgary and Edmonton. So I'm super excited about it.
So just as a follow-up, is that going to be your strategy for the summer? In addition to the Calgary Stampede, are you going to try and hit up these sort of smaller community events, such as, you know, local stampedes and whatnot?
Here we go. Yeah, the summer is a wonderful opportunity to get in front of folks across the province. My family and friends have told me that I need to take a little bit of vacation, and anyone who knows anything about me knows the one thing I'm nuts about is amateur sport. So let's see if I can get a cheap ticket and maybe head out to the Olympics for a couple of days. But beyond that, we'll be spending a lot of time on the hustings talking to Albertans.
Thanks, Michelle. We'll go to our next caller, Sarah Offen from Global. Your line should be open. Nope. Oh, we're going to go actually switch to Graham Thompson.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Graham.
Thompson here. Hello. Just one logistical question dealing with Rachel Notley. Are you actually then, in a sense, moving into her office, even if you're not the official leader of the opposition? Are you going to be using her office, like, in the building?
I'm laughing because I met with Rachel this morning in that office, and at the end she walked out, and I sheepishly said, "Is this my office?" We really do have to sort these things out with the speaker and make sure that we are absolutely following the rules. But yeah, that is my thinking now.
And as a follow-up, going back to the idea, I see, I discussed this before, you're right, Danielle Smith, of course, didn't have a seat for 3 years after becoming leader of the Wild Rose. The difference is, you know, back then, it was a fringe party.
Yeah.
They had one member elected, that was Paul Hinman. They had 3 people cross the floor. There's a pretty small party. It was a fringe party at the time. You are leader of a party that is the official opposition. So do you really think that you can go 3 years?
Well, I hope it's not going to be 3 years. And I'm sure that it will not be 3 years. But, you know, I'm going to be here. You know, where we are standing right now, I can see the legislature. And I'll be here. I may not be sitting on the floor, but you'll see me in the gallery during those times. And I have unbelievable confidence, the most confidence that it is possible to have in Christina Gray's ability to manage what happens on that floor and to manage our caucus. So we are in very, very good hands, and I'm not feeling any pressure about this at all.
Thanks, Graham. We'll go now to Sarah. Very sorry, Sarah. Sarah Offen from Global.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Mr. Nenshi, I know Rachel Notley has been quoted as calling a move away from the federal NDP short-sighted. Have you spoken with her about this, and can you talk about the difference in your viewpoints on this?
Yeah, you know, I will never ever speak for her, but she did use a lot of S words. I think she said silly, short-sighted. And yeah, we do have a different point of view on this because, of course, she grew up in the party, and she comes from a tremendous legacy, family legacy in that party, and I have a ton of respect for that. I will tell you, without attributing anything to her, that in a lot of my conversations, a lot of the concerns that folks have had have been practical more than philosophical. So they've been things like, you know, our databases are interlinked, and how do we fix that? Or, you know, we send volunteers on other campaigns, they send volunteers on our campaigns, how do we manage that? And I actually don't believe that the legal aspects of the framework of how the parties work together really have any bearing on that stuff at all. That we can actually solve those practicalities quite easily if that's the will of the members, and still help each other out as family does.
Do you have a follow-up, Sarah?
Yeah, Mr. Nenshi, you've also been quoted as saying that Danielle Smith's approach to electricity, the reformation that's going on, I think you called it nails on the chalkboard.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that, and how would you? How would you approach electricity?
I sure can. So one of the things about me is that I take everything unbelievably seriously. I never jump in with one toe on anything. So when I first became mayor and realized that I had to act as the shareholder for a pretty big electrical utility, I realized that I needed to get smart on electricity really fast. So I cherish the fact that I still have an NMAX ID card, which doesn't say employee on it, it says owner. And I laughed saying, actually there's 1.4 million owners of NMAX, the people of Calgary, but they said you got to represent them. So I actually know a lot about how the grid works. And when I hear the Premier read her talking points on the grid and on peaking and on dispatchable transmission, it's very clear that she's reading off a script and she doesn't understand. And look, it's really complicated. It took me a long time to figure it out. And I probably have figured out, you know, half of what one needs to know to run an electrical grid. But in any case, when she talks about how you need base load and peaking and renewables can only work for peaking, it's actually sort of the opposite of how the grid actually works. And so that's frustrating to me because people are making billion-dollar decisions based on a incomplete understanding of how it actually works. So what we know is that the UCP's ill-fated moratorium, which was done with no consultation, which we heard lies about in terms of who asked for it. It's very clear that nobody asked for it. Has scared away anywhere between $30 and $300 billion of investment in this province. That we've lost hundreds of good jobs in places like Cardston County. And as we dither and push back the date to green our grid, then it's just going to get much more expensive and much more difficult. So what we really needed to do, look, the clean electricity regulations that Ottawa is proposing are unworkable. They work for most of the country. They do not work for Alberta. They do not work for Saskatchewan. They do not work, I believe, for New Brunswick. But I would take that as an opportunity to negotiate regulations that are workable instead of just fighting. Because as we fight, then both sides retrench themselves, and that investment, because investors need certainty, is never ever coming back. Because there are plenty of other places where you can build renewable energy projects. And so we've scared away investment that frankly will never come back while this government is in power, no matter what they do. And the inconsistency with which they're approaching the electricity grid is shocking. Danielle Smith lobbies that oil and gas polluters should be freed from any obligation to clean up, but that anyone who wants to put up a solar panel or a windmill needs to pay fully for the remediation before they start. Danielle Smith is concerned, she says, about property rights, but in fact is trying to take away the rights of landowners, farmers, and ranchers to put things on their property that would help them and help their communities. And she's taking away good jobs from rural Alberta in so doing. So ultimately, this is a great example of management by talking point instead of management by what is actually needed to build Alberta's economy.
Thanks, Sarah. We're now going to go to the final caller, Jason Markusoff. Your line is open.
Oh, we haven't figured out to block him yet? All right, Jason, go ahead.
What's the thing you most want to change about the Alberta NDP or regarding the NDP's operations now that you're leader?
I didn't catch the very first part of your question, Jason. Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, what's the thing that you're most keen to change?
Oh, what's the most keen to change?
The NDP or regarding the NDP's operations now that you're leader?
Oh, it's a really good question, and I don't have a full answer for it now. What I can tell you is I am starting, as I always start, with what I call an asset-based approach, which is a fancy way of saying appreciating what we have now. So let's remember that this is a party that, if you believe the polls today, before I became leader, is in a dead heat with the well-funded, well-oiled UCP if an election were to be held today. It's a party that got 750,000 votes in the last election, elected not just the largest opposition in Alberta's history, but as I've got to know my 38 colleagues, the smartest, most talented opposition. The smartest, most talented people I've ever seen in government. So there's a lot to build on, and I certainly don't want to break anything that is working. But I also come with a really different perspective on how we operate, on the kinds of things that you focus on as staff and as politicians. And so you're going to see some changes there. You're going to probably see, as I said earlier, a little less emphasis on what happens inside this building and a little more on what happens outside in the community. You're going to see my caucus colleagues out and about more often. And internally, the really boring stuff is you're going to see both a caucus and a party staff that are much more focused, that are much more aligned on ensuring that we win the election in 2027 so that we can bring back a better Alberta. So you're going to see some changes, some subtle, some you won't even notice, some a little more obvious. But right now, my job is to listen. My job is not to break anything. That is working well, and to figure out how we can build on this incredible thing that people like Christina and Raki have built already. Do you have a follow-up, Jason?
Yeah. What have your conversations, if any, been with your fellow leadership candidates, particularly Kathleen Ganley and Sarah Hoffman? Both looked varying degrees of gobsmacked.
They didn't look as gobsmacked as me, though, on Saturday. I think I was the most gobsmacked.
A subject to interpretation, but they, I don't think either of them expected they were going to be single-digit finishers.
Yeah.
And we don't see them up on that stage, flat surface with you.
Balcony, I think, maybe. No, great question. And we have had very open, very frank conversations, not just since Saturday, but over the course of the last 4 months. You know, Sarah Hoffman made me a promise at the very beginning of this campaign, and that promise was, over the course of the next 4 months, we're going to laugh a lot. And she kept that promise. And together, we've done a ton of good work, and I've reached out to all of them, and I have said, you know what, folks, take whatever time you need, because, you know, you've just been through a lot. And then when you're ready, we're going to have a great conversation about your bright future within the party. And the little anecdote is that I gave each of them a beautiful pen that was selected specifically for them. And the reason that I gave them a pen is because I said that this is to show that we are writing the next chapter of Alberta together. And that is something I really believe in. I have been, you know, Jason, you followed me through many, many elections. And you've heard me say this before. But as much as some people hate elections, one of the things I love about it is I love being impressed by the people on stage with me. Every single person has taken an action of great courage to put themselves out there, to put their name and what they believe in out there. And those three, plus Rocky, plus Gil McGowan, have brought so much to me. They've helped me understand things so much better. And I, too, am gobsmacked. The word we used on our campaign was flabbergasted, so we have a lot of old-fashioned words here. But I, too, am flabbergasted by the depth of talent that was on that stage with me every day. And I am just so excited about letting that talent shine and letting more Albertans get exposed to it.
Thank you, Jason. We'll just do one more quick pass for questions.
Anyone else?
And anything in the room?
Okay.
Yuki.
Thank you all so much. The first of many.
Let's go Oilers.
Go Oilers.